I'm delighted I have been invited to share one of my passions with you today, Tudor food. But to be more precise, today we are going to look at what was cooking in the privy kitchens of our Tudor queens. We're also going to look a little bit more into what the Tudors' attitude was towards food, what fashions in food did they encounter, and what food was available to the very ruling class. So, join me in our journey into culinary Tudor royal food.
Food seems to say a lot about us, who we are, where we are from, what is important to us, and sometimes also how we wish to be portrayed by others. This applies as much today as it has in the past, and it also provides us with a degree of curiosity and understanding about the importance of what eating right meant to the queens of Tudor England. In 16th century England, one's status in society and social class would pretty much determine what food was available to you, and in some cases, how much of it. Food was one of the most important and effective social markers, and royalty, as well as the wealthy people, were determined to make full use of it. And lucky for us, there is still a wealth of primary sources, such as original recipe collections, period cookery books, palace household accounts, and records by a diversity of English as well as foreign 16th century chroniclers and travel reporters are priceless surviving witnesses of what food royalty and the aristocracy purchased, received, consumed and enjoyed. When it comes to Tudor kings and queens, there is no shortage of information and how they dined and what food was prepared in their privy kitchens. Household accounts were kept for each year and any purchase of food noted and accounted for. One of the most valuable sources is the Eltham Ordinances of 1526, which provide a unique insight into all the individual dishes served to the king and his queen on meat as well as fish days, obviously closely controlled by the church or the governing body. The more outlandish the menu, the more elaborate the dish, and the more money was thrown into a particular dining experience, the more people talked about it. And it is thanks to those sometimes highly descriptive reports that we know so much about what the kings and their queens consumed on special feast occasions. Stately entertainment, feasts and masques given in honour of foreign ambassadors or visiting fellow royalty are prime examples of the meticulous recording of dining events and the impressive food that was served. and there was a very fine balance between showing off one's power and wealth and not to upstage your honoured guest. And this game of food status symbology can be best observed at the Field of Cloth of Gold feasts, put on for the English and the French monarch and their queens in 1520. While both kings were entertained by each other's wives, the kings eating from golden plates and the queens had their food served on silver plates, this was a very clever way for both kings to retain their superior position without losing face. And the menu was a wide range of high status meat, such as venison, red meat, swan, peacock, and the English chronicler Hall informs us spices, fruits and chilies were served too. And by spices, he is referring to the sugar-coated seeds known as comfits. Fruits would have been so-called dry and wet suckets, such as marmalades, candied orange peels, or seasonally fresh fruit such as cherries and strawberries in June, which were, as we know, Anne Boleyn's personal favourites. In the Ordinances of 1526, the menus for both Henry and Catherine commenced with jelly hippocras. Henry's and Catherine's court must have excelled in the preparation of jellies, as in 1517, Francesco Giagato, I do hope I pronounce his name correctly, if not I apologise, because he had marvelled at the jellies that had been served to the Spanish embassy. The piece de resistance, though, the highlight of every feast, was reserved for the king and the queen to feast their eyes upon: the subtleties. These are sculptures entirely made of sugar paste or marchpane, and often delivering a political or religious message in their choice of character or design. And we know that at the Field of Cloth of Gold, Henry was presented with salamanders or dragons, leopards and ermines. And entertained by Queen Catherine, Francis was to feast his eyes on sugarwork depicting religious scenes such as an angel appearing to shepherds and the kings of Cologne being presented to the Mother of Christ. At Anne Boleyn's coronation feast on the 1st of June 1533, the subtleties featured ships. Now, Anne was already 5 months pregnant then, and so certain foods, such as venison, would have been off the menu for her. But the feast consisted of 3 different courses, each one serving between 24 and 30 dishes, and that followed by the obligatory wafers, hippocras and comfits, before the poor lady was finally allowed to retire and rest. During Jane Seymour's pregnancy in 1537, she developed a craving for quails. And lucky for her, it was deemed suitable, and the whole country led by Lord Lisle, governor of Calais, were looking for quails everywhere in the country and all the way up to Flanders to satisfy her appetite for quails, which upon arrival were roasted and served immediately. And like today, people were fascinated by what royalty craved during their pregnancy. Every feast ended in the void, which is the clearing of the tables and the serving of hippocras, spiced wine, and wafers made with a special wafer iron. It was this concluding part of the feast that would later develop into the banquet, a special dessert course which was all the rage in Elizabethan England. And like today, it was the royal children and the young queens that were at the centre stage of the Tudor media and public interest. So it comes as no surprise really that we find numerous recordings about food that Princess Mary, Princess Elizabeth or Prince Edward were offered. For instance, on Tuesday, the 5th of October 1518, at Mary's proxy wedding to the Dauphin, she was served marmalade, fruit, dried dates and comfits. And on the 2nd of June 1522, at the Emperor Charles's visit, apples, pears, sugar, oranges and lemons were offered. And for the sumptuous feast that featured when the French ambassadors came to negotiate Mary's possible marriage to Francois, Mary's own master cook, Hugh Pigot, created a tower of marzipan, 2 chest boards with their pieces garnished in gold, and a dungeon, plus a manor house surrounded by swans and cygnets swimming in the sugary moat. No sugary cygnets swimming in my moat, just freshly cut grass, I'm afraid. At Edward's christening in October 1537, Mary was served spices, wafers and wine, and on the 25th of June 1544 the royal children were served sweetmeats at Whitehall. Food was also a very popular and very much appreciated gift for kings and queens, especially for Christmas or New Year, and according to Sir Hugh Platt's recipe book of 1600, certain foodstuff could be presented to any friend you have for a New Year's gift. And when Edward Waldegrave was arrested after Queen Catherine Howard's scandal came to light on November the 7th, 1541, he confessed that he had been a visitor to the Dowager Duchess's home, bearing his gifts of wine, strawberries, apples and other things to make good cheer. Depending on the status of the person gifting food to the Queen, this could be something quite simple, such as homegrown pears. The recipe book, A Closet of Ladies and Gentlewomen, one recipe is labelled the making of excellent marmalade, which was given to Queen Mary for New Year's gift. Gifts of food, in particular sugary products as well as sugar cones, were sometimes more obviously sent as a sweetener or bribe. And by contrast, vegetables such as garlic, leek, parsnips or turnip were deemed totally unsuitable for a gift to the Queen, indeed anybody of the ruling class. However, harder to get by and out of season or newly introduced vegetables such as the artichoke or asparagus were, however, always welcome, or at least until the late 16th century, when the English physician Thomas Muffet claims that when he was younger they were so dainty in England, and now they were sold for crowns apiece and so common that the poorest man possessed a princely dainty. The gifting of food was underlined by a rich symbolism, acting as an expression of piety, kinship, or references. It played an essential role in the formation and maintenance of social and political bonds. Tudor England had a surprisingly modern attitude towards keeping healthy, and it was widely acknowledged that good health was based on happiness, exercising, and a balanced diet. However, their concept of a balanced diet differed to ours and was based on the Galenic system of the 4 bodily fluids or humours: blood, phlegm, yellow and black bile, which had to be kept balanced. Illness was caused by an ill balance of these humours, and amongst bloodletting and purging, this could also be achieved by eating food which was counteractive in their properties. And in accordance with this humoral pathology, the leisurely class, which also included royalty, was advised to consume foods that was best suited for their complexion, their physiological makeup, and so to stay away from cold and humid or wet food such as fish, cheese, vegetables, and some dairy or fruit. If a queen wanted to stay healthy during Lent while eating unhealthy, wet and cold fish, this could be balanced by adding hot and dry spices such as pepper or salt to balance the bad humours. Cooking methods such as frying or roasting would achieve the same. It is therefore more likely that the queens would have had more fried and roasted food than boiled. Raw fruit was also deemed unhealthy due to the wet and cold properties, but by cooking the fruit and adding sugar, these undesired properties were reversed. Due to their sedentary lifestyle, the rich as well as the ruling class had to eat easily digestible, delicate food, and that consisted mostly of white bread, poultry, fried or roasted meat, tangy fruits such as oranges, lemons, cherries, quinces, and so on. And wine was regarded more beneficial than ale or beer. And a particular hot nightcap drink served to the royal family was aleberry, which was prepared in the privy kitchens and served in special bowls listed in the inventory of 1547. Location and climate also mattered. Unlike their Italian counterparts, English queens were encouraged to choose red over white wine, as red wine was more suited for a cold and wet climate, such as England's, due to its warming properties. There was also a strong belief that men and women had different humoral makeups and therefore also needed different food. It might explain why there was a privy kitchen for each one, the king and the queen. But anyway, women were considered naturally more cold and moist than their male counterparts. Food for queens was not just a social marker and used as a health corrective, but food favoured by a queen made a certain fashion statement and instantly made the food wholesome and suitable for the whole elite class. Elizabeth's sweet tooth made her teeth rot and turn black, and the arrival of much more widely available sugar in the late 16th century fostered a real craze for sugar and the fashion for having the odd tooth blackened. A little more extreme perhaps than the popular Lady Di haircut of the 1980s. The elite food palette in England was extremely meat heavy and vegetable poor, and rooted in the humoral recognition that England was cold and wet, and thus vegetables and raw fruit would be the wrong choice. However, surviving household accounts do show small quantities of vegetable for pottage, and not quite surprising is the fact that they were often imported from the continent, as then and now anything from somewhere else had to be more prestigious, and Catherine of Aragon, as well as Anne Boleyn and Anne of Cleves, all three had spent their earlier years in Europe and did find the English diet lacking. Catherine of Aragon is known to have requested a Dutch gardener to supply her with fresh salad leaves that she was used to from Spain. The words "Beware of salads and raw fruit, for they will make your sovereign sick," as advised by Wynkyn the Ward in 1508, must have truly left her bewildered. By the 1540s, Sir Thomas Eliot, an English physician who wrote the book Castle of Health, was recommending herbs such as rocket, savoury, borage, purslane, onions and capers, along with imported olives, as they promoted digestion and that was crucial for the health of a conscious Tudor queen. In the 1550s, salads had begun to be served as a first dish and the first course at both dinner, at lunch, and supper in the evening. Indeed, the interest in serving salads to the elite only started to take off in England in Elizabethan times. The practice of employing French cooks to prepare the meals served to the monarch and his queen appears to have started in the reign of Henry VII, whose personal cook was Perrault de Dulles, or Dulles. He also served Henry VIII, and Edward also had a Frenchman managing his privy kitchen, as indeed Mary I did. She employed 2 French master cooks. Only Elizabeth preferred English cooks. However, a certain taste for Italian cookery is notable with the English translation of A Pullario, the Italian banquet, which was published in 1598. In the 16th century, we do see a considerable influence from other European countries in regards to food and wine served at the tables of the ruling class. Spain had a very diverse, multicultural cuisine with Arab and Jewish influence, such as eggplants and couscous. But it is unlikely that Catherine, as a child, would have been fed these, as they very much marked one as a non-Christian. By the time new food from the Americas started to arrive in Spain, which was the first country to receive those new exotic foods from the Americas, such as corn, chili peppers, paprika spice, green beans, tomatoes and potatoes, Catherine had long left her former home, and so was unlikely to actually taste them in her lifetime. Indeed, except for cauliflower perhaps, which was first mentioned by Light in 1586 under the name of Cyprus coleworts, none of the Tudor queens would have found tomatoes, potatoes, corn, green beans or vegetable peppers on their plates, very much unlike other European counterparts. However, Catherine did have her very own privy kitchen by 1516, and those of us who have lived abroad can certainly relate to her craving for food from home, especially in times of homesickness. And it is without any doubt, though, that she must have missed the fresh oranges, lemons, pomegranates, figs, apricots and peaches. And why Henry left it until the 1540s to import apricot and peach trees, therefore, remains a mystery to me. Anne of Cleves, coming from Germany, would have noticed quite a difference in food too, as German cuisine was more pork-orientated, with pickled cabbage, the famous sauerkraut, sausages, and many fried fritter-type food. However, the English preference for sweet Rhenish wine would certainly have found her approval too. Henry's prime goal to sire sons must have boosted his preference for aphrodisiacs, not just for himself but also his queen, whose priority was to conceive a son, and that fast. There was a diversity of food available, all promoting to deliver the expected results. And the asparagus, a trusted aphrodisiac, originally introduced by the Romans, but vanished in England with their collapse, Henry VIII had it reintroduced as part of his quest to succeed in fathering sons. I hope to have given you a taste of royal Tudor food that shows that the spectacular feasts I talked about earlier on were indeed excessive and worth our amazement, but these feasts were far from the movie-like depictions of those cockatrice roast meat creations. There was indeed plenty of choice and many alternatives, so the Queen was able to pick and choose what took her fancy. But now, at the end, I shall leave you with a suggested bill of fare for the King and Queen when they dined in private in their chambers. It is a true example of a typical daily dinner and supper, each one consisting of 2 courses, serving up to 17 dishes placed on the table. Have a look and decide what you would have chosen if you were the Queen. Thank you for watching.